Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why my favorite exercise and the greatest exercise of all time, the conventional deadlift, is not a particularly good hypertrophy exercise. And by not particularly good, means I could probably come up with 200 different exercises that are better hypertrophy exercises if I were to sit down and make a list. Pretty bad. Does that mean we shouldn't do it? No, of course we should. Because it comes back over to the point I always make that if your only goal is hypertrophy, I don't respect you and I don't particularly like you. And I think you're an ass clown. But we have to be honest about the fact that if you are picking a movement specifically for the purpose of hypertrophy, this is not anywhere near the top of the list. It really isn't. So I've had people say, but Minnow Hanselman, Lyle McDonald, or Paul Carter all said this is not a good muscle building movement. How could they say that? What do you think about that? Well, I happen to think they're all right. I happen to think all three of those guys, when they've said that, are correct. I agree with them. And I'm agreeing with them about my favorite and the best exercise ever, the most fun exercise to perform in the history of the world. And if you don't love heavy deadlifts, I don't know what's wrong with you. But they're right, and we need to discuss why they're right. So people say, well, why do we deadlift? Why do you have novices deadlift? Well, novices, oftentimes we have them deadlift so that they can learn to lift a heavy weight. They can learn to strain. But notice we don't ever do a lot of volume. We don't do more than one work set on the deadlift for novice lifters. Okay, there's a reason for that. Now, do you really think they're getting much hypertrophy out of that? No. Are they getting some? Yes. But novices are also weak enough that they are not getting a lot of the negatives of the deadlift. We can throw it in there. They can learn to lift relatively heavy weights, learn to strain a little bit. It's good for you. Builds character. But you guys got to keep in mind, I am under the general assumption that everybody who trains wants to get stronger because that's my wheelhouse. That's what I do. Why would you come to my channel if you don't want to get stronger? Well, why would you be here? I don't build my deadlift by doing the deadlift. I build my deadlift with hypertrophy exercises. I only do singles. I don't even do reps. Okay, and I deadlift over 600 pounds. So what does that tell you? In my 40s. Well, it means the hypertrophy work is how we do it. So let's discuss why the deadlift isn't a good hypertrophy movement. Number one, limited range of motion for most of the primary movers involved. Okay, look at the deadlift. Yes, it uses the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes, the backs, everything. It's a limited range of motion for all the back muscles. Now, we've seen EMG data to where the lats light up with extreme contraction on the deadlift. And that's great. That's phenomenal. They do. How much volume are you really going to do? I mean, realistically, you look at a deadlift and it's like, oh man, look at this. This 405 deadlift hit the lats on the EMG for peak activation just as much. Just as much as a 45-pound pull-up and a guy who maybe doesn't have legs. Like, okay, but how many reps are you going to do of each one in a given workout? In other words, when you're dealing with a deadlift, let's say you're doing a 5-rep max on a deadlift, you're going to do one set with a 5-rep max. Tops. You're not going to come and do a 5x5 with that. Okay. Conversely, the same person using 45-pound pull-up, for example, might come in and do 4 or 5 sets of 8. Hey, you're going to do 4 or 5 times as many quality reps, even at similar levels of perceived exertion. You just can't recover from a bunch of sets of heavy deadlifts. When people are doing a lot of sets of deadlifts, they're doing singles or triples, and they're usually not that heavy. Right? You can do a 10x3 on deadlift or even a deficit deadlift, but it's not going to be with 90% of your max. It's going to be like 75, maybe 80%. How many quality reps are you really getting? the last rep in each set. You know, do 4 sets of weighted pull-ups to failure. Get more total training volume for the lats. Okay, it does work them, but you've got to look at how much quality. And yes, it gets peak activation, but is it total activation? The lats have an extremely limited, to say the least, range of motion on the deadlift. And it's still being worked. Erectors and stuff get a lot of work, but again, how much volume are you doing? I can do 3 sets of 20 on a reverse hyper in the amount of time it takes to recover from 1 heavy set of deadlifts. You can do 4 sets of 20 on a good morning in less than 10 minutes that are limit sets. All right, you need to think in terms of quality volume. Even if you could do 10s, all right. How much training volume can you get for the erectors versus that maybe 1 all-out set of deadlifts? It's totally different. Come over to hamstrings. Yes, the deadlift hits the hamstrings pretty hard. 2 of the heads, right? Hits 2 of the heads of the hamstring really, really hard. Leaves one of them lacking a little bit. How's that compare with a glute ham raise? Or even a leg curl? You guys see the issues here? We're dealing with a movement that does hit a lot of these muscles decently well. But it's a limited number of heads, a limited number of range of motion. Now look at some of the other lifts I just did. Okay. Axle bar Pendlay rows. Trains the grip, by the way. That's how I build my grip largely for my deadlift. That's how I build my back for my deadlift. Strict Pendlay rows. Same thing. All right, look. See me doing some sets of 12 against bands on the glute ham raise. Yeah, the deadlift hits the hamstrings. This hits all 3 heads of the hamstrings. Hip thrusts. You want to talk about a movement that can build a lot of muscle to the lower body. You can handle a lot of volume on. I'll do a set in here later. Hip thrusts. Glute bridges. Those are hypertrophy exercises. You can do a lot of really heavy 10 rep sets on a hip thrust. I usually do 5 by 10. Right now I usually use like 435 for 5 sets of 10 on the hip thrust. Okay, you need to look at the muscle activation involved in the sheer number of quality reps. Not that hard to recover from. What we're looking at here is, it's not that the deadlift doesn't work a lot of muscles, it's that the stimulus to fatigue ratio is bad. It is very hard to recover from deadlifting. It's not even heavy deadlifting is that hard. I don't get beat up that badly by a max deadlift unless I miss a rep. But you think you're going to come in and do 3 sets of 10 on a deadlift? Like with an actual challenging 10 rep? In other words, you're a 500-pound deadlifter. How many sets of 10 you really think you're going to do with 385? And are you going to be able to get out of bed the next morning? That same amount of recovery, you could easily do multiple 10 rep sets of a hip thrust, a Pendlay row, glute ham raise, and probably still recover easier. All of those have a superior muscle stimulus. If you're trying to get bigger, look guys, I love the deadlift. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the deadlift. It's an amazing test of strength. It's an amazing display of strength. And that's what I use it for. And that's why I love the exercise. It's just a very primal, manly exercise. To take a heavy, dead ass weight, to take 600 heavy ass pounds and to pull it off the floor. Okay. That's a test of strength. It's a test of your testicular fortitude. Because that's what I'm about. But for hypertrophy purposes, for developing muscles, no, I don't think so. I don't even use the deadlift to build the muscles of my deadlift. I use rows, good mornings, reverse hypers, hip thrusts, glute bridges, glute ham raises. So when people make the statement that it's not a particularly good muscle builder, even I follow that logic. I actually endorse that philosophy with my own training style. These guys are right. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.